Yo, what's up, guys? Leafs finally snapped their 6-game losing streak tonight, beating the Vancouver Canucks 3-2 in a shootout. Now, really good game tonight, guys, I will say, between Leafs and Canucks. Really back and forth game, a really good pace of this game, some good opportunities in this game today by both teams, but the Leafs find a way to finally snap their losing skid, after that horrendous homestand, that bad game against Seattle the other night, guys. Leafs finally put in a decent performance tonight, getting a really solid win tonight against the Canucks. Even though, guys, a lot of us Leaf fans are already saying to ourselves that, this season's already a bust. It's done, 8 points out of a playoff spot now, obviously with Montreal beating Buffalo tonight and the Florida losing today as well. I still feel like it's a bit of a far reach for the Maple Leafs to have any possibility of making the playoffs. But tonight's win was a positive one. Of course, you got to snap that losing streak. You don't want to go losing like 10 in a row or something like that, And I felt the first period, both teams shared a couple chances here and there. Austin Matthews had a couple chances, best chance for Leafs in that first, I felt, was when Matthews got in front of the net. There was a bit of a scramble. Leafs didn't score there, unfortunately. I thought he also made a great defensive play, intercepting a pass there, blocking a pass from getting to Vancouver's player there. It makes a great play there defensively. So I thought Matthews was doing a good job in the first period, guys. I thought the Leafs had some other chances, same with Vancouver. Both goalies were making some very good saves tonight, guys. Really solid performances by both goalies as well. But I felt the Leafs did a good job at times in this game, especially in the third period. I thought the Leafs were dominant in the third. I thought Vancouver was a little bit better in the second period against the Leafs. Vancouver obviously did have 2 goals in the second period compared to the Leafs one. But as we saw, William Nylander return to the lineup tonight, which is obviously great to see after missing the last 7 games. I thought Willie looked pretty decent in this game, was moving well, was moving the puck well, had some good passes. Obviously didn't score tonight, but after being out for 7 games, it's good to see William Nylander back in the lineup for the Maple Leafs. We also saw Marshall Rafai starting tonight, guys, in his NHL debut, replacing Simon Benoit. And obviously Marshall Rafai, you could tell it was his NHL debut tonight. He's a little bit behind, looked a little bit nervous. He was obviously at fault for the first goal against the Canucks tonight, guys. Rafai doesn't look up. Obviously tries to knock the puck out of the Leafs end around the boards. Doesn't see or doesn't look up to see if there's a teammate there along the wall. Unfortunately, there's a couple Canucks players there. They keep it in play. And then obviously, as we saw, Lekaraki or whatever the hell his name is, was in front of the net there, wide open in front. And he's able to score, completely wide open in front of the net there. Vancouver's player there to get the shot on Joe Wall, beat him top shelf there. It's just another bad breakdown by the Maple Leafs, to give up the first goal of the game to the Canucks. They're obviously the worst team in the NHL, and us Leaf fans are probably saying to ourselves, you're really losing to the Vancouver bloody Canucks, and it was just another situation where we say to ourselves, this hockey team here just really cannot defend in their own end, and as we saw, Vancouver almost had a second goal, but there was goaltender interference on Garland on Joe Wall, so obviously that was called back. We saw Ekman Larsson. He hit a post on a 2-on-1. And then after, we saw Nick Robertson continuing his good play from last game against Seattle. Gets a nice assist to Nick Waugh. Makes a great play to stop. And then skate forward. Then peel back. Finds Nick Waugh in that open slot. And Nick Waugh is able to get that goal there. Nick Waugh and Robertson, I felt, have been playing really well together this season. Nick Waugh and Robertson have been getting some really good chemistry together. I think Nick Robertson has played another solid game tonight after playing a really solid game. I felt he was the best Leaf against the Kraken the other night, doing that again tonight, being one of the better players for the Maple Leafs tonight, guys, with that great assist to Nick Waugh. And then Vancouver, obviously, they were pushing. They outshot the Leafs, I think it was 14-11 in that second period. Had some really good chances. I thought Joe Wall made some good saves. But, guys, as always, like I mentioned last video, you are always going to win some money if you place a bet on Morgan Rielly being on for a goal against the Leafs, And as we saw today, Morgan Rielly has the puck at the blue line, sees a little bit of open ice, and Morgan Rielly thinks to himself, oh, you know what, there's some open ice, I'm going to make a play. But we all know Morgan Rielly, guys, us Leaf fans, we all know when Morgan Rielly has the puck on his stick, he is more likely to screw it up and make a mistake than do something good for the Maple Leafs. And as we saw, Morgan Rielly gets stripped of the puck. Vancouver comes in on the odd man rush. Rielly's obviously trying to get back into position, of course. Pettersson makes a great pass right under Riley's stick, of course. And then as we saw, Willander scores a goal right under Joel Wall's blocker. Another goal right under Joel Wall's glove there. I think it's a savable shot, but the guy's got all day to shoot. Morgan Riley again, hurting the Maple Leafs again, guys. Vancouver taking a 2-1 lead, and I'm thinking to myself, how much longer do I have to endure watching 44 play for this hockey team? Now, obviously, guys, Vancouver takes a 2-1 lead going into the third, but obviously some great news for us Leaf fans. Now, I don't wish any player injury at all or whatsoever, but when I heard Morgan Riley was not returning for the third period, I said to myself, and I tweeted this as well, I got a feeling the Maple Leafs are going to win this hockey game. And sure enough, a couple minutes after we find out Riley is out for the rest of the game, the Leafs have a face-off in Vancouver's end. Max Domi's able to retrieve the puck in a scramble, and he's able to shoot it on net, and it goes right over Topolipo, hits his back, and goes right into the net there, and the Leafs tied up at 2-2. And I said to myself, I got a feeling they're going to win this hockey game. And the Leafs were absolutely dominant in that third period. After they tied up the game, they outshot Vancouver 18-5. They had all the ozone time, had ample chances to take the lead in that third period. Unfortunately, they weren't able to score it. One of the frustrating things about the Leafs this year is that they can get so much ozone time and then they cannot score a bloody goal. And tonight was a bit frustrating in that third period. Vancouver was really holding on by a thread there to not give up that third goal in that third period. The Leafs were pushing, had ample opportunity, but Vancouver was able to get a point, push it to overtime. And man, oh man, overtime was absolutely nuts, to say the least. Tavares had a chance. Matthews had a breakaway that we saw get called for a penalty shot. Nylander almost turned the puck over, and Vancouver almost scored there. Nylander had a breakaway. He fanned on the shot. Matthews had a chance. He fans on it. John Tavares as well had a chance. Vancouver had a chance in front with Hronek. Jake McCabe was able to swipe it out in front. It was a wild overtime. Joe Wall made some saves. Topolipo made some saves. It was a very, very back and forth overtime. A very exciting overtime, to say the least. I don't know how nobody was able to score in that overtime, guys. Matthews missed the penalty shot, of course. As we saw the Leafs go into a shootout, Vancouver missed their 2 penalty shots. William Nylander does a great job on his shootout shot there. His penalty shot there. Going in fast always drives a goalie nuts when a guy comes in fast on you, right? I'm a goalie. I can tell you straight. When a guy comes in fast on you, it's harder for a goalie to react. William Nylander does a great job going in with speed. Beats Topolipo top shot there. Great goal by William. Then Matthews, he gets his revenge, gets his redemption there. Able to score the shootout winner there, snapping the Leafs' 6-game losing streak, guys. And honestly, it's great that they lost. It's a great that the Leafs snapped their losing streak. But obviously, us Leaf fans are looking at the bigger picture right now. What happens with the players? What does Treliving do? We obviously heard Elliot Friedman talking about how the Leafs have been making calls. How they're ready to sell and trade guys. So, listen, even though it's only 8 points now instead of 10, I think we could all agree, guys, that the Maple Leafs still need to focus on dumping some guys, getting rid of some guys that, are not going to help this team moving forward. As we saw, there are guys like Domi who's on a 5-game point streak. I think he can help a playoff team. Bobby McMahon can help a team. Maybe even OEL. Nick Waugh scored a goal tonight. He could be effective. I would keep a guy like Nick Robertson, give him more of an advanced role, playing him maybe top 6 minutes. Nick Robertson's been playing some great hockey this year at times, has a career-high 14 assists this year. So I think Nick Robertson deserves a little bit more leash. Like I said last video, I think he deserves more playing time. I would not trade Nick Robertson because he's a young asset, and I think the Leafs could use a guy like him moving forward. But getting rid of guys like Nick Waugh, like I said, getting rid of some veteran presence, that could help some teams recuperate some assets, and that would be nice to see. But it would be a blessing if the Leafs could get rid of 44, obviously. That would be the cherry on top, fireworks celebration, if you ask me, guys, if the Leafs would be able to find a suitor to trade Morgan Riley. Now, obviously, in this game here, you could see that without Morgan Riley in the game, the Leafs were just more sounder defensively, just play better hockey without the guy. The guy's just an absolute disgrace of a defenseman. And obviously, I don't wish him any injuries, of course, but when he's not playing, last time he was out for 6 weeks, I remember a few years ago, Leafs played great defensively without him. Morgan Rielly has just shown that in 12 minutes of play tonight, he was a -2. He was heading in the direction of just another one of those games where you're like, how does this guy here not sit up in the press box, even though he makes $7 million a year? It baffles me at times, honestly, but I think that guy seriously needs a change of bloody scenery. He's just not good enough to be playing for the Leafs in general. I don't even know how he's an NHL defenseman, if you guys ask me. He is just lost in his own end at times. You saw that again tonight in this game. Just really a frustrating game again for Morgan Rielly, only playing 12 minutes tonight. Even Marshall Rafai, I'm not going to be as hard on Marshall Rafai. It's his first NHL game, of course. He obviously did have a turnover. Berube clearly did not trust him, only playing 9 minutes. He played Jake McCabe 27 minutes, Ekman Larson 28. He played Carlo and Stetcher 23 minutes. Those guys logged a crap ton of minutes near the end of the hockey game there, guys. Not playing Rafai a lot in this game, not showing the trust. I would have played him a little bit more. You got to see what you have in these kids. If you are going to trade some veterans, you're going to have to play these guys. But clearly, Berube just wanted to end this losing streak. Didn't trust the guy. Obviously, looked shaky at times in this game, looked nervous. But I'm not going to really dump on Marshall Rafai too much. It was his first game. Hopefully, he does get better moving forward. But then again, at times, he was playing with Rielly, so I understand why he could be making some mistakes, if you ask me. But I thought Matthews played well in this game. I thought Joe Wall made some great saves in this game. Raw and Robertson have played well recently as of late, guys. But as I've been saying, it's an 8-point gap, from the playoffs. Things have looked bleak for the Maple Leafs this year. You got a couple games left before the Olympic break. You got to play Calgary and Edmonton. I'm pretty sure on a back-to-back Monday and Tuesday. So see what you can do in those games. I'm not looking for the Leafs to go and win every bloody game, because obviously, we want this hockey team to make changes. We want them to improve as a hockey club and, look at the real problems that this hockey team has and why they're not able to get over the hump and try to winning a cup and winning more than 2 playoff rounds in 9 freaking years. But you got some decent performances tonight. Domi's continuing to play well, performing, for a team to possibly make a trade for him. McMahon was pretty quiet tonight. Tavares, he's looking really slow at times, just not very effective. Matthew Nyes is obviously dealing with this injury still, just doesn't look like himself at all. I've been saying this the last couple of videos, he really needs to get on this 2-week break and really recuperate and hopefully heal up a little bit for the time being until they get back from the Olympic break, guys. But you know what? Listen, at the end of the day, though, the Leafs get the 2 points tonight. Obviously, it's going to be a frustrating couple months left over in the season because we all want the Leafs to be trading guys off. Vancouver's obviously not a great team. Leafs did their job tonight, got the job done today. If they had lost to the Vancouver Canucks, that would have been extremely embarrassing. Fireable offenses, if you ask me, for certain people in management, of course, because you cannot be losing to the Vancouver Bloody Canucks. They're just a woeful team. If they had won tonight, that would have been the first time they would have won back-to-back games on home ice. They're a really bad home team. It would have been a major indictment on the Maple Leafs tonight if they could not win this hockey game tonight. But they found a way to win, coming back from 2-1 down. You got some solid performances tonight by Matthews. Domi played well tonight. Robertson and Waugh played well tonight. I thought OEL played well tonight. I thought McCabe had a decent performance tonight, even though he hasn't had a good couple games the last few weeks, guys. We'll see what happens in the next game against the Calgary Flames. At the end of the day, though, guys, couple games left before the Olympic break. Hope to God that the Maple Leafs do the right thing. Obviously, like I said, they're talking to teams, probably going to trade some guys, get these younger kids up, see what you have. Obviously, Easton Cowan didn't play tonight. Quillen didn't play tonight as well. So we'll see what happens, guys, before the break. We'll see what this management has up their sleeve right now. Solid win for the Maple Leafs, finding a way to snap the losing streak. It's about bloody time, because things were looking really, really ugly for this hockey team. But I would love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on this hockey game tonight, guys. So like and like this video. Subscribe if you guys want to see more content. Go Leafs, go as always, guys. See you guys on the next episode of Leafs Unfiltered. Ciao, guys.